The evening air carried a slight chill as May Lean hurried down the busy street toward Allegro, the fancy restaurant where she'd been working for the past 3 months. She was running late again. Not by much, just 5 minutes. But in a place like Allegro, 5 minutes might as well be an hour. Mr. Donovan, the manager, had a thing about punctuality. May clutched her bag closer to her chest as she dodged through the crowd. Inside was a carefully folded change of clothes, her comfortable shoes for the walk home later, and a worn music theory book she'd been studying during breaks. The book was second-hand, with coffee stains on several pages and pencil notes in the margins from its previous owner. But May treasured it all the same. She slipped through the employee entrance at the back of the restaurant, the familiar smells of garlic, searing meat, and expensive wine greeting her. The kitchen was already in full swing, a controlled chaos of shouting chefs and clanging pots. "Cutting it close, Lynn," called out Ray, one of the line cooks, without looking up from the vegetables he was chopping with impressive speed. "Bus broke down again," May replied, rushing toward the small locker room to change. It wasn't entirely a lie. The bus had broken down yesterday, forcing her to walk an extra mile to get home. Today she'd simply lost track of time practicing piano fingerings on her kitchen table. In the cramped locker room, May quickly changed into her uniform, a crisp white shirt, black vest, and black pants that the restaurant required all servers to wear. As she buttoned up her vest, she caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror on the wall. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, evidence of too many late nights and early mornings. She quickly splashed some cold water on her face and pinched her cheeks to bring some color to them. "You look terrible," said a voice behind her. May turned to see Zoe, another waitress, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick. "Thanks, just what every girl wants to hear." May laughed, tucking a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. "No, seriously. You're working too hard," Zoe said, capping her lipstick. "Double shifts 3 months straight? That's crazy, even for you." May shrugged as she tied her hair back into a neat ponytail. "Music school isn't going to pay for itself. Your fingers will fall off before you get there if you keep this up," Zoe warned, but her tone was kind. Everyone at Allegro knew about May's dream of going to the prestigious Lambert School of Music. Just as everyone knew the tuition costs were well beyond what a waitress could normally afford, even at a high-end place like Allegro where the tips could be generous. "My fingers are fine," May said, flexing them dramatically, "and I'm almost halfway to my tuition goal." Before Zoe could respond, the door swung open and Jenny, the hostess, poked her head in. "May, thank goodness you're here. Mr. Donovan is looking for you. We've got that big private party tonight, remember? The Harrington group?" May's stomach dropped. She had completely forgotten about the Harrington party. Once a month, Richard Harrington, tech genius, millionaire, and notorious difficult customer, reserved the entire west wing of the restaurant for his business associates. The staff drew straws to see who would serve them. Somehow May always seemed to pull the short one. "Coming," May called, quickly checking her appearance one last time before following Jenny out. Mr. Donovan was waiting by the bar, his perpetually worried expression even more pronounced than usual. He was a small man with a receding hairline who ran the restaurant with military precision. "Ah, Lynn, there you are," he said, checking his watch pointedly. "The Harrington party will be arriving in 15 minutes. Everything needs to be perfect. These people can make or break our reputation." "Yes, sir," May nodded, having heard this speech before. "Harrington specifically requested our best server, which is why you're here," Mr. Donovan continued, surprising May. She was good at her job, sure, but she never thought she'd be singled out as the best. "He did." "Well, no," Mr. Donovan admitted. "But Paulo called in sick and you're the only one who can handle Harrington without having a breakdown." That made more sense. May had served the Harrington party twice before. While other servers found Richard Harrington intimidating, May had discovered that as long as she anticipated his needs and remained invisible unless needed, things went smoothly. "I won't let you down," she promised. "See that you don't. And remember, these people tip well if they're happy." Mr. Donovan gave her a meaningful look before hurrying off to inspect the place. Settings. May spent the next 15 minutes making sure everything was flawless, wine glasses polished to a sparkle, silverware perfectly aligned, napkins folded with precision. The West Wing had been transformed for the evening. with fresh flowers on each table and the lighting adjusted to create an atmosphere of exclusivity and luxury. At exactly 7 o'clock, the Harrington party arrived. Richard Harrington led the group, a tall man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and the confident stride of someone used to commanding attention. Behind him followed 12 men and women in expensive suits, all carrying themselves with the same air of importance. May watched from a discreet distance as Mr. Donovan personally greeted them and led them to their tables. She took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for a long, demanding night. "Showtime," she whispered to herself, approaching the tables with a professional smile. "Good evening. My name is May, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said smoothly. "May I start anyone with a drink?" The orders came rapidly: expensive scotch for Harrington, various cocktails and fine wines for the others. May memorized each request without writing anything down, a skill that usually impressed customers and earned better tips. As she moved efficiently between the bar and the tables, delivering drinks with practiced grace, May couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. The group was discussing some sort of major investment deal. Numbers in the millions were being tossed around casually, as if they were talking about pocket change. "The prototype testing exceeded expectations," Harrington was saying as May carefully placed his scotch in front of him. "We'll be ready for market by next quarter." One of the women at the table leaned forward. "What about the rumors that Vertex is developing something similar?" Harrington waved a dismissive hand. "They're years behind us. By the time they catch up, we'll have cornered the market." May moved away, heading to the kitchen to put in appetizer orders. The evening progressed smoothly at first. The food was excellent as always, and the group seemed pleased. May maintained her invisible unless needed presence, refilling glasses before they were empty, and clearing plates the moment they were done. But as the night wore on and the alcohol flowed freely, the atmosphere changed. Harrington's associates became louder, their laughter more boisterous. May noticed Harrington himself remained relatively composed, watching his companions with an expression that seemed almost like boredom. It happened during the main course. May was carefully placing a plate of seared scallops in front of one of the women when someone at the table made a joke. The whole group erupted in laughter, causing one man to bump into May's arm. The sudden movement sent her off balance, and before she could catch herself, the water pitcher in her other hand tilted. Time seemed to slow down as water cascaded onto Richard Harrington's lap, soaking his obviously expensive suit pants. The table fell silent instantly. May's heart stopped. "I'm so sorry, sir," she gasped, mortified, already reaching for napkins. "It was an accident. I didn't mean—" She expected anger, perhaps even demands for her firing. What she didn't expect was Harrington's calm reaction. He simply stood, accepting the napkin she offered, and dabbed at his pants. "It's just water," he said, his voice even. Then as May continued to apologize and dab at the table, something caught his attention. "What's that?" he asked suddenly, pointing to her wrist. Confused, May glanced down. The sleeve of her shirt had ridden up, revealing the small tattoo on the inside of her wrist. A simple design of piano keys, a reminder of her dream. "It's nothing," she said quickly, pulling her sleeve down. "Just a tattoo. I'm very sorry about your suit, sir. The restaurant will of course cover any cleaning costs." But Harrington wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at her with a curious expression, his head tilted slightly to one side. "You play?" he asked, gesturing to her now covered wrist. May hesitated, unsure if she should engage in personal conversation while on the clock. "Yes, sir, piano." "Professionally?" "No, sir, just—" "It's a hobby." It was more than a hobby, of course, but May didn't think her life story would interest a man like Richard Harrington. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or amusement. Before he could say anything else, one of his associates called for his attention, and the moment passed. Harrington turned away, rejoining the conversation at the table. May retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly. She had gotten lucky. Most customers would have made a scene over the spilled water, demanded to speak to the manager or worse. Instead, Harrington had seemed almost intrigued. "You okay?" asked Ray as May entered the kitchen. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I just spilled water all over Richard Harrington," she admitted, leaning against the wall. Ray's eyes widened. "And you're still employed." "Impressive." May managed a weak smile. "For now, at least." She spent the rest of the evening being extra careful, making sure everything was perfect. The group ordered several expensive bottles of champagne for dessert, seemingly celebrating the successful conclusion of whatever business they had been discussing. As May served the last round of drinks, she noticed Harrington watching her with that same curious expression. It made her uncomfortable, but not in a threatening way. It was almost as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. Little did she know that by the end of the night her life would change completely. The grand piano that sat unused in the corner of the dining room would soon become the center of attention. And Mei Lin, the hard-working waitress with dreams of music school, would become something else entirely. For now, though, she simply continued doing her job, unaware that Richard Harrington was formulating a very unusual dare in his mind, one that would test her in ways she never expected. The rest of the evening seemed to stretch on endlessly. May moved between tables in the kitchen with practiced efficiency, but she couldn't shake the feeling of Richard Harrington's eyes following her. Every time she approached his table, she noticed him studying her with that same curious expression. By 10 o'clock, most of the regular diners had left Allegro, but the Harrington party showed no signs of winding down. If anything, they had grown more boisterous. 3 bottles of champagne later, ties had been loosened, jackets draped over chairbacks, and laughter flowed as freely as the alcohol. "Another round," called out one of the women, raising her empty glass. Her cheeks were flushed, her designer blouse slightly rumpled. May nodded with a polite smile, though inwardly she sighed. She had been on her feet for nearly 12 hours now, having worked the lunch shift before this evening's special event. Her lower back ached, and she could feel a blister forming on her right heel. But she kept her discomfort hidden behind a professional facade. Tips from a party like this could equal a week's regular pay. As she approached the bar to order more drinks, Zoe sidled up beside her. "How's it going with the Millionaires Club?" Zoe whispered, nodding toward the Harrington party. "They're in good spirits," May replied, placing her order with the bartender. "But I'll be happier when they leave and I can sit down." Zoe glanced over at the group. "The boss man keeps watching you. Did something happen?" May adjusted her sleeve to make sure her tattoo was covered. "I spilled water on him earlier. He was surprisingly decent about it." "Decent?" "Harrington." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "That's not the word most people use to describe him. My cousin works at that tech magazine, and she says he's known for making grown men cry during business meetings." Before May could respond, the bartender placed a tray of drinks in front of her. She carefully lifted it and made her way back to the Harrington table, where the conversation had somehow turned to music. "Classical is dead," a balding man was saying emphatically as May distributed the drinks. "Nobody under 30 even listens to that stuff anymore. It's all electronic music now." "That's ridiculous, Paul," argued a woman with short gray hair. "The symphony was completely sold out last weekend." "I couldn't even get tickets." "Yes, but who was the audience?" Paul countered. "People our age, that's who. The youth have moved on." Richard Harrington, who had been quietly sipping his drink during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "What do you think?" he asked, looking directly at May, catching her off guard. May froze, the last glass of champagne still in her hand. All eyes at the table turned to her. "I'm sorry, sir?" she asked, certain she had misheard. "About classical music," Harrington clarified, his expression unreadable. "You have a piano tattoo. You must have an opinion." May felt her face grow warm. Servers at Allegro were trained to be invisible, to serve without drawing attention to themselves. Being suddenly included in a customer's conversation, especially one as prominent as Richard Harrington, was unexpected and somewhat alarming. I think good music is timeless," she answered carefully, placing the final glass on the table. Whether it's classical or modern, she hoped this neutral response would satisfy them, allowing her to slip back into invisibility. But Harrington wasn't finished. "You said earlier that you play. How long?" he pressed. The others at the table were now watching the exchange with interest. Conversations paused. "Since I was 6, May admitted, wondering where this was leading. 17 years now. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "And you work here, serving drinks to people like us instead of playing professionally. Why is that?" The directness of his question made May uncomfortable. She was aware of Mr. Donovan hovering nearby, likely concerned about a server engaging too much with the VIP guests. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she replied, trying to keep her tone light. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on your dessert order." As she turned to leave, Harrington's next words stopped her in her tracks. "We had a pianist scheduled tonight, you know." May turned back, unsure why he was telling her this. "For background music," Harrington continued, gesturing toward the grand piano that sat in the corner of the dining area. The beautiful instrument was mostly for show these days, though occasionally the restaurant hired musicians for special events. "I wasn't informed," May said, glancing questioningly at Mr. Donovan, who had drifted closer. "He called in sick," Mr. Donovan interjected quickly. "Last minute. We couldn't find a replacement on such short notice." "My apologies, Mr. Harrington." Harrington waved away the apology. "No matter. It seems we might have a replacement right here." His eyes never left May's face. A chill ran down May's spine as she realized what he was suggesting. "Oh no, sir, I couldn't possibly," she began. "Why not?" Harrington challenged, leaning back in his chair. The entire table was watching now, some with amusement, others with confusion. "I'm working," May said simply. "I'm sure your manager could spare you for one piece." Harrington looked at Mr. Donovan, who seemed caught between a desire to please his important customer and maintain restaurant protocol. "Mr. Harrington, I'm not a professional," May tried again, her heart beginning to race. "And I haven't played in public for a very long time." Something shifted in Harrington's expression then. A gleam of challenge entered his eyes. "I see," he said, taking another sip of his drink. "You're afraid." "I'm not afraid," May responded automatically, then immediately regretted it. She was allowing herself to be drawn into whatever game he was playing. Harrington smiled slightly. "Prove it." The table had gone completely silent now, all pretense of separate conversations abandoned as everyone watched the unexpected drama unfold. Even servers from other sections had paused, sensing something unusual happening. "Sir, I really don't think—" Mr. Donovan began nervously. "I'll make it interesting," Harrington interrupted, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a sleek leather checkbook. $5,000. A collective gasp went through the room. May stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" $5,000, Harrington repeated, uncapping an expensive-looking pen. "If you play anything that impresses me." Right now, May's mind raced. $5,000 was nearly half of what she needed for her first year's tuition at Lambert. It was more than she made in 2 months of double shifts. "And if I don't impress you?" she asked, surprised at her own boldness. Harrington shrugged. "Then you've lost nothing but a few minutes of your time." The restaurant had grown eerily quiet. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to see what was happening. May could feel dozens of eyes on her waiting for her response. "This is highly irregular," Mr. Donovan said weakly, but no one paid him any attention. May's thoughts turned to her small apartment with its leaking ceiling, to the stack of bills on her kitchen table, to the Lambert School of Music brochure she kept pinned above her bed. $5,000 would change everything, but the thought of playing after so long in front of an audience made her stomach churn. "I haven't practiced properly in months," she said quietly. "I've been working double shifts." "All the more impressive if you can pull it off." "Then," Harrington replied, his eyes never leaving hers. One of his associates, a woman with sharp features and an expensive haircut, laughed. "Richard, you're torturing the poor girl. She's a waitress, not a concert pianist." Something flared inside May at those dismissive words. She had been a promising student once before financial realities forced her to put her dreams aside. Before her life became an endless cycle of serving others. "I'll do it," she heard herself say. Mr. Donovan looked like he might faint. "Lynn, your shift isn't over." "It's just one song," May said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "And it's what Mr. Harrington wants." Harrington smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face, making him appear younger and less intimidating. "Excellent." He signed the check with a flourish, folding it and placing it on the table. "This is yours if you impress me." May nodded, then looked at Mr. Donovan for permission. After a moment's hesitation, he gave a resigned nod. As if in a dream, May made her way toward the piano. The restaurant remained silent, all eyes following her. The enormity of what she was about to do hit her. It had been so long since she had played for anyone but herself. What if she froze? What if she made a fool of herself in front of everyone? The piano bench felt cool and smooth as she sat down, adjusting her position out of habit. She lifted the fallboard to reveal the keys, pristine white and black, waiting expectantly. May placed her hands in her lap, trying to gather her thoughts. What should she play? Something technically impressive to show skill? Something emotional to create a connection? Her mind raced through possibilities, dismissing one after another. "Whenever you're ready," Harrington called, his voice cutting through the silence. May closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought about all the hours she had spent practicing as a child. Her mother standing beside her, gently correcting her posture. She thought about her first recital at age 8 and the applause that had followed. She thought about the last time she had played publicly, 3 years ago, before life had interfered with her dreams. Without conscious decision, her hands moved to the keys, and the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room. It wasn't the most technically challenging piece, but it was beautiful and evocative, and she knew it by heart. The first few notes were tentative, her fingers remembering rather than thinking. But as the familiar melody washed over her, something shifted. The restaurant around her faded away. The watching eyes, the pressure, the dare, all of it receded as the music took over. Her fingers moved more confidently now, muscle memory awakening. The gentle, flowing rhythm of the piece carried her forward, each phrase leading naturally to the next. The piano at Allegro was well maintained, its tone rich and resonant, responding beautifully to her touch. May felt something inside her coming alive again, a part of herself that had been dormant during the long months of endless shifts and deferred dreams. In this moment, she wasn't a waitress playing for a dare. She was simply a musician, doing what she was born to do. As the final delicate notes of the piece faded into silence, May kept her eyes closed, not yet ready to return to reality. For a few precious seconds, she remained in that other world, where nothing existed but the music. Then she became aware of the utter silence around her. She opened her eyes slowly, uncertain what she would see. The entire restaurant was still, as if frozen in time. Richard Harrington was watching her, his expression unreadable. His associates looked stunned. The other diners, the kitchen staff, even Mr. Donovan, all were staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. In that suspended moment, May realized something had changed irrevocably. Whatever happened next, she could never go back to being just the invisible waitress again. The silence lasted only a moment longer before the restaurant erupted in applause. The sound startled May, breaking the spell that had held her captive at the piano. She rose from the bench, her legs unsteady beneath her. A flush crept up her neck as she realized that everyone, staff, diners, kitchen workers, was looking at her with expressions ranging from surprise to admiration. Richard Harrington remained seated, his face still unreadable. May couldn't tell if she had impressed him or not. Had she just made a fool of herself for nothing? The thought made her stomach clench. "Well," Harrington said, finally, his voice cutting through the applause. That was unexpected. May stood awkwardly by the piano, unsure whether to return to serving or to wait for his verdict. Mr. Donovan hovered nearby, looking equally uncertain. "I haven't heard Debussy played like that in a very long time," Harrington continued. "Where did you study?" "I didn't, not formally," May admitted. "I had a teacher from ages 6 to 18. Mrs. Chen, she was strict but wonderful." Harrington raised an eyebrow. "And after 18? May looked down at her hands, those hands that had just brought music to life after months of serving food and pouring drinks. "Life happened," she said simply. Something shifted in Harrington's expression then, a softening around the eyes, perhaps recognition of a familiar story. "Play something else," he said, but it sounded more like a request than a command this time. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Mr. Donovan stepped forward, clearly torn between keeping his important customer happy and maintaining some semblance of normal business operations. "Mr. Harrington," he began carefully, "we're delighted that you enjoyed May's playing, but she does have other tables to attend to." "And I'll double the check," Harrington interrupted, not taking his eyes off May. 10,000. "For one more piece." Mr. Donovan's protest died in his throat. Even May, who had been ready to return to work, froze at the number. $10,000. It was an absurd amount of money for 10 minutes of playing. It was nearly a year's rent. It was the difference between struggling through another year of double shifts and actually having a shot at music school. Why? She found herself asking. Why me? Why this? It wasn't a question a server was supposed to ask a customer, especially not one as important as Richard Harrington. But in this strange moment, with the normal rules of Allegro temporarily suspended, May needed to understand. Harrington considered her question, taking a sip of his drink before answering. "I've spent the evening listening to these people," he gestured to his associates. "Talk about investments and acquisitions and profit margins. Important things, practical things. Things that have made us all very wealthy." He paused. "But not one of them can do what you just did. Not one of them could create something beautiful out of thin air." He leaned forward, his expression intent. "I want to hear more. And I suspect you need the money, so it's a mutually beneficial arrangement." May glanced at Mr. Donovan, who gave a small, helpless nod. The rest of the restaurant waited, collective breath held. "One more piece," she agreed. This time, as she returned to the piano, May felt different. The paralyzing fear was gone, replaced by something else, a quiet determination. If this was to be her moment, her unexpected chance, she would make it count. She sat down, adjusting her position on the bench. What to play? Something that would show more technical skill than Claire de Lune. Something that would truly earn that check. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she decided. Then, with newfound confidence, she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. The haunting, melancholy opening notes filled the restaurant. This piece was more technically demanding, with its delicate ornamentation and emotional complexity. As she played, May felt herself telling a story through the music. Her story. The years of practice and dreams, the setbacks and disappointments, the job that paid the bills but slowly drained her spirit. All of it flowed through her fingers into the keys. When she reached the middle section, with its more hopeful tone, her playing became more assured. Her body swayed slightly with the music, no longer stiff with nervousness. The final arpeggios cascaded like water, clear and pure before resolving in the gentle, questioning last chords. When she finished, there was no applause, only a weighted silence filled with emotion. May opened her eyes to see several people dabbing at tears, including the sharp-featured woman who had dismissed her earlier. Harrington stood up slowly and walked over to the piano. Without a word, he placed the check on top of the instrument. May looked down at it, hardly believing what she saw. He had written it for $15,000, not 10. "Why?" she whispered, echoing her earlier question. "Because that was worth it," he replied simply. The moment was broken by a commotion at the entrance to the restaurant. A woman in an elegant black dress had entered, looking slightly flustered. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she called, making her way toward the Harrington party. "Traffic was a nightmare." "Professor Lin," Mr. Donovan rushed forward to greet her. "We weren't expecting you. Mr. Harrington's pianist already called in sick, and we found a replacement." He glanced at May, who was still sitting at the piano, confusion evident on her face. The woman, Professor Lin apparently, looked at May with interest. "So I heard." From outside. "That was Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, wasn't it?" "Beautifully played." Harrington made the introductions. "Eleanor Lin, head of piano studies at Lambert School of Music. Eleanor, this is—" "I'm sorry, I don't know your full name." "May," she supplied automatically. "May Tanaka." Professor Lin's eyebrows shot up. "Tanaka, any relation to Hiro Tanaka?" May's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her father's name. "He was my father. The concert pianist." Professor Lin looked stunned.
Hiro Tanaka was your father?
"He was brilliant. His Rachmaninoff interpretations were unparalleled. I saw him perform several times before." She trailed off, seeming to realize she might be touching on a sensitive subject. "Before the accident," May finished for her. 2 years ago. The restaurant had gone quiet again, everyone listening to this unexpected revelation. Even Harrington looked surprised. "I had no idea," he said. "You're Hiro Tanaka's daughter, working as a waitress?" There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine confusion. May stood up from the piano bench, suddenly feeling exposed. These strangers were not entitled to her life story, her pain, the difficult choices she'd had to make. Yet something compelled her to speak. "My father and mother were on their way to his concert in Vienna when their car crashed," she said quietly. "After they died, there were complications with the estate, insurance problems, legal issues. I had to drop out of my freshman year at Lambert to take care of my younger brother, Taki. Giant when your father died. And I lost my parents," May said, a hint of steel entering her voice. An uncomfortable silence followed. Harrington broke it, addressing Professor Lin. "What do you think, Eleanor? Is she as good as I think she is?" Professor Lin studied May thoughtfully. "Based on what I heard outside, she has her father's gift, certainly. Natural musicality, emotional depth. With proper training?" She left the sentence hanging, full of possibility. May felt dizzy. This night had taken so many unexpected turns, and now the head of piano studies at the very school she dreamed of attending was discussing her potential as if she were a promising student rather than a waitress in a restaurant. "Ms. Tanaka," Professor Lin said formally, "I would very much like to hear you play again, perhaps in a more official capacity. Would you be interested in auditioning for a spot at Lambert? We still have scholarship funds available for our mid-year intake." The world seemed to tilt beneath May's feet. An audition? A potential scholarship? It was everything she had wanted, everything she had reluctantly set aside when life demanded other priorities. "I can't," she said, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. "My brother Taki, he's only 16. I'm his guardian. I work these shifts so he can stay in his school, keep some normalcy in his life." Can't what?" Harrington asked. "Can't pursue your own dreams? Can't honor your father's legacy?" Anger flashed through May. "You don't understand. When you have responsibilities, I understand perfectly," Harrington interrupted. "Better than you might think. But that check I just wrote? It could buy you some time. Time to figure things out, to prepare for an audition, to make arrangements for your brother." Professor Lin nodded. "We have students with all sorts of life circumstances. Ms. Tanaka, family obligations don't have to mean abandoning your own path completely." May looked from Harrington to Professor Lin, then at the check still sitting on the piano. $15,000. Chance to audition. A potential way back to the path she'd been forced to abandon. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course," Professor Lin replied, handing May a business card. "Call me when you're ready." No pressure, but there was pressure. May could feel it building inside her, hope and fear in equal measure. Hope that somehow, against all odds, her life might be about to change. Fear that reaching for this opportunity might be selfish, might destabilize the careful balance she'd created for Taki's sake. As she tucked the business card and check into her pocket, May made her way back toward the kitchen, needing a moment alone to process everything that had happened. The weight of decision pressed down on her shoulders. Behind her, the conversation resumed among the Harrington party, but she could feel eyes following her. Harrington's, Professor Lin's, Mr. Donovan's, her fellow servers. In the space of a single evening, she had transformed from invisible waitress to the center of attention, and she didn't know yet whether this transformation was blessing or curse. In the quiet hallway leading to the kitchen, May leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in her ear. "Music always finds a way, little sparrow. If it's in your blood, you can't escape it forever." Was this music finding its way back to her, or was this just a cruel glimpse of what could have been, what might never be? The decision loomed before her, impossible yet necessary, and whatever she chose would change everything. May pushed open the door to her small apartment, the events of the evening still swirling in her mind. It was nearly midnight, but she knew Taki would be waiting up for her. Despite her insistence that he get proper sleep on school nights, her brother had developed a habit of staying awake until she returned home from late shifts. Sure enough, Taki was sprawled on their worn couch, textbooks open on the coffee table, though his attention was fixed on a video of a piano concert playing on his laptop. At 16, he was all lanky limbs and boundless energy, so much like their father in appearance that sometimes it hurt to look at him. "You're late," he said, closing his laptop as she entered. "Everything okay?" May set her bag down and slipped off her shoes, her body aching from the long shift. How could she possibly explain what had happened tonight? It felt like a dream, something that couldn't possibly have occurred in her ordinary life. "I played tonight," she said simply. Taki sat up straighter, immediately alert. "You what?" "I played piano. At the restaurant. For a customer." "But you never play in public anymore," Taki said, confusion evident on his face. "Not since—" "I know." May sank onto the couch beside him. "It wasn't planned. This customer, this rich tech guy named Harrington, he saw my tattoo and somehow it turned into this whole thing where he dared me to play." Taki's eyes widened. "And you did it?" Just like that, May reached into her pocket and pulled out the check, handing it to her brother. His jaw dropped as he read the amount. $15,000? For playing piano? His voice cracked with disbelief. Is this real? It's real, May confirmed, still having trouble believing it herself. And that's not all. She told him everything. About Professor Lin from Lambert, about the offer to audition, about the possibility of a scholarship. As she spoke, Taki's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex, pride mixed with uncertainty. You have to do it, he said when she finished. You have to audition. May shook her head. It's not that simple, Taki. What about you? What about our life here? Can't what? Can't go back to playing? Can't follow your dream? Taki's voice rose with emotion. That's crazy, May. This is what you've always wanted. What I want doesn't matter, May said firmly. I'm responsible for you now. I can't risk the stability we've built. Taki stood up, frustration evident in every line of his body. So I'm the reason you're giving up again? That's not fair, May. I never asked you to sacrifice everything. I'm not sacrificing everything. I'm being practical. Being a guardian doesn't mean giving up who you are. Taki interrupted. Dad would be so disappointed if he knew you were using me as an excuse. The words hit May like a physical blow. That's not fair, she whispered. Taki's expression softened. He sat back down, taking his sister's hands in his. Look at this apartment, May. Look at our life. You work double shifts serving rich people food so I can stay in my school. You never see friends. You never play anymore. Except sometimes late at night when you think I'm asleep. You're fading away and it scares me. Tears pricked at the corners of May's eyes. She hadn't realized Taki had noticed so much, had worried so much. When's the audition? He asked. I haven't even called Professor Lin yet, May replied. And I'm not sure I will. Taki squeezed her hands. Call her. Tomorrow. Promise me. May looked at her brother. No longer the child she'd stepped in to raise after their parents died, but a young man with opinions and wisdom of his own. Maybe it was time to start listening to him. I promise, she said finally. 2 weeks later, May stood outside the imposing stone building that housed Lambert School of Music. Students streamed past her, instrument cases strapped to their backs, talent and purpose evident in their hurried strides. Did she belong among them? Could she? After her conversation with Taki, she had called Professor Lin, half expecting the woman to have forgotten their encounter. Instead, Lin had immediately arranged an audition expressing genuine excitement about hearing May play in a proper setting. The intervening 2 weeks had been a blur of preparation. May had cut back her hours at Allegro, using some of Harrington's money to buy them breathing room. Every spare moment had been devoted to practice, her fingers remembering, reawakening, rediscovering the joy and discipline of serious playing. Now, as she approached the recital hall where her audition would take place, doubt crept in again. What was she doing here? She hadn't had formal training in years. She was competing against students who had been playing seriously all along, who hadn't taken a detour into serving tables and paying bills. You came. May turned to see Professor Lin approaching, elegant as she had been that night at Allegro, but somehow warmer in the daylight. I wasn't sure you would, Lin continued. Many people talk about following their dreams, but few actually take the steps. I'm still not sure this is the right thing, May admitted. The right thing is rarely certain until after you've done it, Lin replied with a small smile. Are you ready? The committee is waiting. May nodded, following Lin into the building. The recital hall was smaller than she had imagined, with perhaps 30 seats arranged before a beautiful grand piano. 3 people sat in the front row, 2 older men and a middle-aged woman, all with the slightly stern expressions of experienced educators. This is May Tanaka, Professor Lin announced. Daughter of Hiro Tanaka. A murmur ran through the small committee at the mention of her father's name. May suppressed a flicker of irritation. She didn't want to be judged as Hiro Tanaka's daughter, either positively or negatively. She wanted to be judged as herself. What will you be playing for us today, Ms. Tanaka? Asked one of the men, peering at her over reading glasses. May had prepared Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a piece of considerable technical difficulty that showcased a range of skills and emotions. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious given her time away from serious study, but she had been working on it day and night. Professor Lin's face softened with understanding. I remember now. There was talk of a daughter and son. The music world lost to Chopin's Ballet No. 1, she answered, her voice steadier than she felt. The committee members exchanged glances, impressed by the ambition of her selection, perhaps or skeptical of her ability to execute it properly. Whenever you're ready, the woman said, making a note on the clipboard in her lap. May approached the piano, adjusting the bench to her height. This instrument was far superior to the one at Allegro, a full concert grand with perfect action and rich tone. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. A deep breath, a moment of centering, then she began. The opening measures of the ballade were deceptively simple, a gentle questioning that belied the complexity to come. May played them carefully, establishing the mood, allowing the music to breathe. Then came the main theme, melancholy yet hopeful, building gradually in intensity. As she played, memories washed over her. Her father sitting beside her on the piano bench, guiding her small hands over the keys. Her mother bringing tea during practice sessions that stretched into the evening hours. The family concerts they would hold in their living room, her father playing, her mother singing, Taki dancing around them in childish delight. The music grew more demanding, the technical challenges more complex. A series of difficult runs approached, the passages she had practiced most obsessively over the past 2 weeks. May's fingers flew across the keys, not perfectly, but with genuine passion and growing confidence. She was dimly aware of the committee watching, evaluating, judging, but as the piece progressed, their presence faded from her consciousness. There was only the music now, the story it told, the emotions it expressed, the connection to something larger than herself. The final section of the ballade was a test of endurance and skill, rapid passages requiring absolute precision, building to a dramatic and challenging conclusion. May poured everything she had into these final moments, her body swaying with the music, her face reflecting the emotional journey of the piece. The final chords resonated through the small hall, hanging in the air for a breathless moment before fading to silence. May's hands remained poised above the keys. She was breathing hard, as if she had run a great distance. In a way she had, traversing the years between who she had been and who she might become. She turned to face the committee, bracing herself for their reaction. Their expressions were unreadable, professional masks revealing nothing of their thoughts. "Thank you, Ms. Tanaka," said the woman with the clipboard. "That was quite moving." "Your technique shows the expected rust," one of the men commented, "but your musicality is undeniable." "You have your father's hands," the other man observed, "and his expressiveness." Professor Lin had remained standing at the back of the room during May's performance. Now she stepped forward. "The question before us isn't whether Ms. Tanaka has gaps in her technical training. Of course she does after years away from formal study. The question is whether she has the foundation, the potential, and the determination to excel if given the opportunity." The committee members exchanged glances again, a silent communication born of years working together. "We'll need to deliberate," the woman said. "If you could wait outside, Ms. Tanaka." May nodded, legs slightly unsteady as she rose from the piano bench. The emotional intensity of the performance had left her drained yet somehow invigorated. Whatever the committee decided, she had done something today that felt true to herself, to the self she had almost forgotten. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, eyes closed, heart still racing. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from Taki. "How did it go? Did you show them who's boss?" A smile tugged at her lips. Her brother's unwavering confidence was both touching and slightly absurd. He had no idea how many talented pianists there were in the world, how competitive music school admissions were, how many factors went into these decisions. Before she could reply, the recital hall door opened. Professor Lin emerged, her expression giving nothing away. "They're ready for you," she said. May took a deep breath and stepped back into the hall. Toward the committee, toward their verdict, toward whatever came next. In that moment, regardless of their decision, she realized something important. The music had found its way back to her, just as her father had predicted it would. And this time she wouldn't let it go so easily. 1 year later, May stood in the wings of Lambert School of Music's main concert hall, waiting for her cue. The spring recital was the most important event of the academic year, showcasing the school's most promising students. Being selected to perform was an honor typically reserved for advanced students, not first years like May, yet here she was, dressed in a simple black gown borrowed from her roommate, heart pounding as she listened to the performer before her finishing a complex piece by Liszt. The applause that followed seemed to echo forever. "You ready?" Professor Lin appeared beside her, elegant as always in a midnight blue dress. "Not even a little bit," May admitted with a nervous laugh. The past year had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life. After her audition, the committee had deliberated for less than 10 minutes before offering her a full scholarship, with a stipend, an almost unprecedented decision that had caused quite a stir among the faculty. The transition from waitress to full-time music student hadn't been easy. For the first months, May had struggled to keep up with classmates who hadn't taken years away from serious study. Her technique was rusty, her theory knowledge spotty at best. There were nights of frustrated tears, moments of doubt when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But there had been triumphs too. Her natural musicality, her emotional connection to the pieces she played, her absolute determination to succeed. These qualities had gradually earned her the respect of professors and fellow students alike. And she had worked harder than anyone, often staying in the practice rooms until the building closed at night. "Professor Chen is in the audience," Lin said, interrupting May's thoughts. Third row center, May's stomach dropped. Professor Chen was a legendary pianist and teacher, known for his exacting standards and brutal honesty. He rarely attended student recitals, considering them beneath his notice. "Why is he here?" May whispered. Lin smiled enigmatically. "Word gets around when someone interesting appears on the scene, especially someone with your background." Before May could respond, the stage manager approached. "You're up next, Ms. Tanaka." May nodded, taking a deep breath. She glanced down at her phone one last time before handing it to Professor Lin. The screen showed an encouraging text from Taki. "Knock 'em dead, sis. Dad would be so proud." Taki had thrived during the past year as well. With the pressure eased by May's scholarship and the remainder of Harrington's money, they had moved to a better apartment closer to both their schools. Taki had joined the school orchestra, showing signs of musical talent himself, though his instrument of choice was the cello rather than the piano. And now came the announcer's voice from the stage. "Performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. First movement, May Tanaka." May walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding her. As her vision adjusted, she could make out the packed auditorium, hundreds of people waiting to hear her play. Among them, somewhere, was Professor Chen, his critical ear attuned to every note she would produce. She approached the piano, adjusted the bench, and sat down. The orchestra behind her was ready, the conductor watching her with calm attentiveness. They had rehearsed together just twice, barely enough to coordinate the complex interplay between piano and orchestra that Rachmaninoff demanded. This piece had been her father's signature, the concerto he had performed more than any other during his career. Choosing it had been both an homage and a challenge to herself. Could she honor his memory while also making the music her own? May placed her hands on the keys and began the famous opening chords, dark, resonant, full of foreboding. The orchestra joined, the music swelling around her. Then came her first solo passage, a moment of cascading notes that required both technical precision and emotional depth. As she played, May felt strangely calm. The nervousness that had gripped her backstage melted away, replaced by total immersion in the music. Her hands seemed to know exactly what to do, her body responding to the flow and structure of the piece as if she had performed it 100 times before. In a way, she had. Not on stage, but in her mind, listening to recordings of her father playing this very concerto. As a child, she would sit beside the stereo, eyes closed, imagining her own hands creating those sounds. Now the imagined had become real. The movement built toward its climax, orchestra and piano in powerful dialogue. May's fingers flew across the keys, meeting every technical challenge while maintaining the emotional core that made Rachmaninoff's music so beloved. The final chords approached, triumphant, resolute, a declaration of victory over darkness. As the last notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. May stood, slightly dazed by the intensity of the performance and the audience's response. As she took her bow, she scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. Taki was there in the 5th row, clapping wildly and beaming with pride. Beside him sat an unexpected figure, Richard Harrington, the millionaire whose dare had set all of this in motion. He met her gaze and nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement. And in the 3rd row center, just as Professor Lin had said, sat the legendary Professor Chen. His expression was inscrutable, his applause measured but steady. Backstage, May was immediately surrounded by fellow students offering congratulations. Professor Lin appeared, handing back her phone with a smile. "That was exceptional," Lin said. "You've come so far in just 1 year." It felt... May searched for the right words. It felt like coming home. Lin nodded, understanding. "Professor Chen would like to speak with you. He'll be in the green room after the recital ends." May's pulse quickened. A personal audience with Chen was rare and potentially life-changing. His connections in the music world were unparalleled. The rest of the recital passed in a blur. When it was finally over, May made her way to the green room, both eager and apprehensive about meeting the famous professor. Chen was already there, standing by the window, his back to the door when she entered. "Professor Chen," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for coming tonight." He turned to face her. In his 70s now, Chen still had the upright posture and piercing gaze that had intimidated generations of piano students. "I knew your father," he said without preamble. "We were rivals, then colleagues, then friends. I was to have dinner with him and your mother the day after they died." May hadn't known this connection. Her father had spoken of Chen with great respect, but never mentioned a personal relationship. "He had your photograph on his piano," Chen continued. "He would point to it and say, 'My daughter will surpass me one day.' I thought it was just a father's pride speaking." He paused. Perhaps it wasn't. May didn't know how to respond to this unexpected glimpse into her father's thoughts. "You played his piece tonight," Chen observed. "Brave choice. It was his favorite," May said simply. Chen nodded. "And now? What are your plans?" The question caught her off guard. "I have 3 more years of school and then—" "No," Chen interrupted. "I mean now this summer. I'm conducting a master class in Vienna. 6 weeks, 12 students. I have 1 spot remaining." May stared at him, hardly daring to believe what he seemed to be suggesting. "Vienna?" she whispered. "Where your parents were headed when they died," Chen said. "It would be fitting, would it not, for you to go in their place?" Before May could respond, the door opened and Taki burst in, followed more sedately by Richard Harrington. "You are amazing," Taki exclaimed, throwing his arms around his sister. Then, noticing Chen, he stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt." "Not at all," Chen said, his severe expression softening slightly. "You must be the brother." "Taki Tanaka," he confirmed with a quick bow of his head. "And you're Professor Chen. Wow, I've heard so much about you." Harrington hung back, observing the scene with evident interest. May hadn't seen him since that night at Allegro, though they had exchanged a few emails over the past year. Brief updates on her progress that she felt she owed him, given the role he had played in changing her life. "Mr. Harrington," she said, extending her hand, "I didn't expect to see you here." He shook her hand with a small smile. "I wouldn't miss it. I've been following your progress through Professor Lin. She speaks very highly of you." "Professor Chen has invited me to his master class in Vienna this summer," May told them, the reality of the offer still sinking in. Taki's eyes widened. "Vienna, that's incredible!" Harrington nodded approval. "Well-deserved, I'm sure." But Chen was frowning slightly. "There is the matter of cost," he said. "The instruction is covered, but travel, accommodation, living expenses, not insignificant." May's heart sank. She had used most of Harrington's money for living expenses while transitioning to student life, ensuring Taki had what he needed for school. There was little left for an expensive summer in Vienna. "That won't be a problem," Harrington said smoothly. "Consider it an investment in musical excellence." May started to protest, but he held up a hand. "Please, allow me this. What good is money if not to support exceptional talent? Besides," he added with a hint of his former arrogance, "I can write it off as a charitable donation." Chen looked satisfied. "Then it's settled. I'll send the details to Professor Lin." He gave May a formal nod. "Work hard before you come. Vienna demands the best." After he left, Taki let out a whoop of excitement. Vienna! Dad would be over the moon. May turned to Harrington, emotion making it hard to speak. I don't know how to thank you. Again, he shrugged. No thanks necessary. But I do have one request. Anything, May said sincerely. When you give your first professional concert, and you will, save me a seat. His expression grew thoughtful. That night at Allegro when you first played, it was the most authentic thing I'd experienced in years. In my world, true moments are rare. I'd like to be there for more of yours. Before May could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Professor Lin, accompanied by several faculty members eager to congratulate May on her performance. The room quickly filled with people, conversation, plans for the future. Standing in the midst of it all, May felt a profound sense of rightness. The path from that fateful night at Allegro to this moment had been unexpected, challenging, and ultimately transformative. Where it would lead next, Vienna, then perhaps concert stages around the world, she couldn't know for certain. But for now, surrounded by her brother, her professors, and the unlikely millionaire whose dare had changed everything, May Tanaka was exactly where she belonged.